Good morning, class. We are continuing in our study of Exodus that we hope to finish before long. Before we get into that, please indulge me for just a second or two, maybe a little bit longer, but I wanted to mention the bulletin article that I had included this week, quickly summarize it, because at the end of it I made a statement that will actually spring into another discussion I will bring up very quickly before we get into our Bible study. And I said, see the sign-up sheet circulating or posted in order to make written commitments. Now, what we mean is, and this is important, we have our special outreach scheduled for Saturday the 21st that will be here at the square. Everybody knows about that. Now, we have discussed it a few times. In the nature of the case, you have to discuss it. It's a very big event. It's going to take a lot of logistics to pull it off and to make it look right, to have our best foot forward in the community when that day comes. And I'm excited that we have that opportunity. This means from time to time, in fact, frequently, we will have to discuss these issues, and perhaps more so as the hour approaches, as the day approaches, because there are a lot of loose ends and we just don't want to leave it all to chance. So I want to thank our sister Susan in particular for so much she does. Everybody here, all of you have different things you do that accomplish work behind the scenes that we probably don't know about, but we are aware of the fact that every single individual contributes. In this case, over the last few days, she has actually compiled a sign-up sheet, and I think this is perfect. What it has are these three categories. First of all, it's a volunteer sheet for signing up for at least 4 different slots during the day. Now, we have to be there from 8 until 4 p.m. Our booth will be up and running from 8 in the morning, Saturday the 21st, until 4 p.m. We will need volunteers. The ideal would be if everybody had the stamina, all of us be there all day long. But that's probably not realistic. And I would imagine there'd be some comings and goings, and people will want to get up and walk around and go grab a bite to eat or accomplish other things that have to be done. Some of you I know have appointments and other things you're scheduled to do in the afternoon. So we have the sign-up sheet, and it's from 8 to 10, 10 to 12, 12 to 2, 2 to 4, just to make it neat, even categories of the 2 hours per shift. Now, when it comes to that, we would want at least 2 per shift, 2 to volunteer. At least, that's the minimum. And then hopefully we can have more. So what I'm saying is, all of us could sit there, and even if it's not our shift we signed up for, we get there early or whatever, we could just sit around, hang around, we'll say, just chill out with everybody else. But we'll need at least 2 that are committed to being there so that nothing happens and we don't have a slot where it's just an empty booth. You see what I'm saying? All right, so that's the sign-up list, and we already have one family signed up or saying they will sign up from 2 to 4. So then the others are open. Now, then there's a to-do list, like to set up the canopy. All of us can participate in that. Set up tables, cloths, chairs, set up an easel with a board, set up or hang up sidewall to put posters on, sign up for a Bible drawing box, to put that out and to make that ready. In fact, I have some things there along those lines she's provided. Sign up with QR code for our website or YouTube. Now, let me see if I can find, here's one. I saw it. I'm just having a hard time getting it loose. Here we go. Susan has made a QR code. I'm not savvy about these sorts of things, but I think people with smartphones can scan these, take them right to our YouTube page and thus our archived videos. And even our website, I see she has a QR code to go to our website, which is different from our page on YouTube. Our YouTube page is strictly that, videos, but the website contains a lot more material. So you can go to either one, and people like to do that this way today. They just scan it in. So I'm appreciative of that very much. I would have no clue how to do that. Then we have several other things. I'm not going to read it all. A lot needs to be done. In fact, I left one out when I was discussing this with her over the phone the other day. I forgot to mention an extension cord and something to cover the cord with, like pieces of carpet. I think we have some left over from this carpet we could just cut wide enough to where, they cover it up, people don't trip over the cord. So we need to add that to the list. Then there are items needed. We could put that there 4 to 8 empty 2-liter bottles for the tent. We'll actually empty to start with, but we will fill them with water. Why? Well, because the tent has to be weighted down, and it's made, we saw that the other day when we put it together, with little pockets on the side that are wide enough for 2-liter bottles, but I at first thought we'd use milk jugs. They won't work. They're a little bit too wide. Ice chests. I can provide one if you want to bring one too for ice, and we need to purchase a number of waters to give away. 2 to 3, well, three gift Bibles, we will say. I think because Susan had come up with like 3 different drawings, and I like that idea. 3 times during the day, we'll have a drawing, just a blind drawing, to give away a Bible to somebody that signs up. She also made sign-up sheets for that, for the Bible giveaway. These are neat. Here's some, and then we could put them on cardstock maybe. Print
business cards, I can print those on.
Great. Would they be the same size? Okay, we'll cut these up and have the stack of these. And so if somebody walks by and they see it, just, hey, would you like to sign up for the free Bible giveaway? And no strings attached. You just have to put out enough, your name and your number and your email, some way for us to get in touch with you. And when we do the drawing at those specific hours, what hours did we talk about? Like 10 o'clock, 10 o'clock noon, and then 2 o'clock, right. We'll have the 3 different drawings, and we'll let them know that's when those times will be. So hopefully they won't if they're milling about, they'll come back over there and see and hear the drawing and see who wins a Bible. Somebody's going to win a Bible, and that's good because it helps the community. We're giving out Bibles. Then we've got these kind of posters she's provided for us about the giveaway. It's important for us to discuss this, I really believe, because this is a big hoorah, our last hoorah, you might say, before the gospel meeting for this year, though we need to plan many things like this, and hopefully this will work out to where we could do this regularly. It's going to take work. It takes work. It'll take time and effort, but that's the only way we'll ever grow. Enter to win. So she has several different things. I won't go over all of that now, but simply say we have the sign-up sheet and a number of things. Thank you so much. By the way, remind me, pick up, I guess it'll be Tuesday. Tomorrow's Labor Day. It'll be Tuesday to pick up the banners. They're ready. The banners. And I don't know if the other's ready. They just told me the order was ready. So we also have some little, what do you call those? Notepads that will be customized. They look good. I like that. So thank y'all, everybody who's helping with this. And everybody's needed. Every one of us needs to be there sometime during the day to be a part of it. And I'm sure, here's what I suppose will occur. If you're sitting there, you're in the booth for a few minutes, somebody's going to walk by and you know them. And they're going to say, hey, is that you, Linda? Is that you, Jesse? Is that you, Barbara? They'll know them. And so it'll strike up a conversation. And we'll have some way to make connections with people that way. So thank y'all for all you're doing. Let's pray about this and watch and pray, work and pray, work and pray. Now we're in the book of Exodus. We're glad to have Jesse with us today while his class is away for the holiday period. And we know he'll help us make contributions. Chapter 36 is where we are. Earlier in the book of Exodus, there were some instructions in kind of a detailed way given for the construction of the tabernacle. And then there was this terrible episode of the golden calf that interrupted everything, the smooth flow of obedience. They just stopped obeying when that happened. So they had to go back and fix that situation. They had terribly messed up everything. And when Moses interceded and persuaded the Lord not to destroy Israel over that idolatrous event, an immoral event, there was a lot of immorality, then they had to go back and pick up the pieces. So they're repeating some things. We have instructions repeated that were given earlier. If some of this seems familiar, it's because we read through it in earlier chapters in the 20s of chapters 20s of Exodus. We will also see something like a recap of it at the end in chapter 40. You have here instructions being given. Then we get to chapter 40, you will have the narrative of how they carried out the instructions. So at least 3 times we're getting exposed to this. Now let me say this also. It's detailed, very much so. And by our reading through Exodus, and we'll try to do quite a bit of that this morning, we're seeing just what point was being made in New Testament books about the difficulty of knowing all the small details of the law of Moses and being able to keep them all perfectly. The law of Moses was extensive, I think over 600 commands, specific commands, were isolated by the rabbis in their counting of the commands. So we're talking about quite a few number of specific instructions given. How could one individual possibly master all that material in his or her mind and remember everything? Well, of course, you'd say it's written down. True, and that's a great help, is it not? These books were obviously objective evidences of what God had told Moses to do. But it still required a lot of effort. It requires effort when we read it. Sometimes I have discussions with members of the church from other congregations, people I know, who talk about a concern that is expressed about the way the time is used for sermons. In some congregations, it is thought perhaps more time could be spent on pragmatic, down-to-earth, contemporary events that affect our lives directly today, so that we would know counsel directly from the Lord for these kinds of situations we face today. And so they would hope, those who express these views, that the teachers and the preachers would not concentrate so much on details as big picture items. Now, in defense of preachers who are detailed men, we could say they are very well versed in the Bible. They're very well steeped in knowledge of the details of Scripture. There's a lot to be said for that. And I would compliment all of my preaching colleagues who have made that effort, who are continuing to work into that area and know more and more of the details of the text. Some of them have a great deal of it memorized. Very commendable. And I would say, too, that it's the Word of God, and so for one who cares and who really looks, there's going to be something in any passage, no matter how detailish it may seem. There's going to be material that will help me as an individual grow. Now, I do believe a balance has to be struck, and I'm not saying I've done it. It's an ideal. But a balance has to be struck between those kinds of biblical details, absolutely essential, and the application of these biblical principles to the sorts of things we face today that probably were not even faced, not in the same way, just 20 or 30 years ago. I mean, they were beginning to be faced. We were living in very unique, very trying times, and we all know that, so I'm not going to go over that again. But just to say, I understand why some people would express those concerns and would say we would hope in the midst of studies like this one that we could pause and see what the application is. So as we do read and study, I ask of you as the class to participate in that way, asking questions about it. You could even ask, what does this mean to us? And that's a legitimate question, fair question. It's not in any way being irreverent. What does this mean to me? So we'll try to keep that in mind as we read. Now we're in Exodus chapter 36, verse 1. Remember, there are certain craftsmen of the children of Israel who have been selected to build the tabernacle, to put it all together according to the instructions. We've discussed this. You don't have to be a missile scientist to realize if you just told the congregation, build the tabernacle, told the whole group, well, what's everybody's business is nobody's business. And two men who feed a horse, well, if that happens, the horse will grow skinny. Why? Because what is everybody's business is nobody's business. Two men who maintain a boat, it will leak. What's everybody's business is nobody's business. I think those are Chinese proverbs, but the CCP has, of course, forgotten them. But anyway, it is a principle we see. You couldn't just say to Israel, build you a tabernacle. There had to be specific people chosen to be over the work, to be the foreman. This means somebody had to coordinate things. You had to go through certain people who would say, yes, so many amounts of material are over here amassed. They are stored in this place. And these are the kinds of things here that can be used when we get to this part. So we will start here. And you can't have 1,000 people with 1,000 different opinions about, no, let's start there. No, I want to start here. And it's fine to hear different views, but eventually the buck has to stop with somebody if it's ever going to get done. So there were foremen. We have then these men, Bezalel and Oholiab, Bezalel and Oholiab. These are also men who will serve over the craftsmen. There are several other craftsmen. Now, I've said all that to say this. Let's read. I'll be reading from the ESV again, chapter 36, verse 1. Bezalel and Aholiab and every craftsman in whom the Lord has put skill and intelligence. Now, stop here. This isn't just a natural gift. I mean, you can't say it was just an accident by genetics. They were born that way, having carpentry skills. No, God was behind this knowledge. But more than just their ability to do that kind of work, more is going to be involved because they have to coordinate a large crew to work. So you have the foreman over the job, but they're not doing it all by themselves. They've got to coordinate everybody who's working. So how will they know how to do that? How will they be sure to get it right? It says, the Lord has put skill and intelligence to know how to do any work in the construction of the sanctuary, shall work in accordance with all that the Lord has commanded. We're going to go on to see the implication is, in the statement is, that these craftsmen here, these special craftsmen, have been given this knowledge not only to direct the work, but to give instruction to the workers underneath them, under their authority. Now, why is that a big deal? You wonder, how are you getting involved in those deep weeds here? Because the inspiration of the Lord is behind this skill they had to teach. They have the skill to teach this knowledge to other workers. The idea is inspiration would lead them to teach. Now, in which way? This goes back, in fact, this is something that I had overlooked, honestly, when I published a book a few years ago on the inspiration of the Bible. The book where I defended the proposition that the Bible, as it was originally given, is and was and is, you could say, a wholly without error work, completely without error. Now later, some scribes might have sometimes inverted words and things, but that can all be easily worked out. We can figure out how they did that and backtrack over their work. But when it was originally given, the books of the Bible, we argue, were given by inspiration. And we make a distinction between revelation from God's Spirit and inspiration. Now, they're very closely related, but it is an important distinction. For example, Aholiab and Bezalel could receive revelations from God. Actually, it was Moses that got the revelations. So Moses received revelations, and he's giving the instructions. Now, let's take somebody else. If they received a revelation in which God would implant miraculously in their minds knowledge that they would not have naturally on their own by just studying as everybody normally studies. It's miraculous knowledge, supernatural. So many liberals in the theological area would say, yeah, I believe in revelation. Not all do, but some would. But I don't believe inspiration. They think inspiration is the same, and they collapse those two. But inspiration is another process. Again, you have revelation, you receive the information from God, and then the inspiration is the ability to communicate what was received by revelation. It's the ability to communicate that in a way where no errors are made in the communication. For example, these men could receive revelations from God. Here's how I want the tabernacle. Get that one night. The next morning they go out to teach all the people, and they forgot some of the details if they're doing it on their own. Well, God spoke about that. Let's see, I didn't write it down. But no, that's not going to happen that way. They are being led to remember the revelation. Now, why does that matter in terms of the doctrine of inspiration? It shows us inspiration as a process was itself supernatural, related to, but independent of the idea, the phenomenon of revelation. So inspiration was the guiding of their mouths to say the right thing. So when they spoke infallibly, because God wouldn't let them make errors. Later on, they put up the tabernacle and it's sagging here and there and it's all out of proportions. Where did we go wrong? Well, Aholiab just forgot what the Lord had told him. No, that's not going to happen that way. That's the charge made against biblical writers today. Paul got some revelations from the Lord, and then he said, now go and deal with that. Tell the Corinthians something about what I just told you. So Paul sits down, what am I going to say? No, it's not that. Paul is not sitting down and concerned about what he's going to say. What he writes is guided by the Spirit. So that's a lot there from chapter 36, verses 1 and just the first few verses. But I think it's important because I had overlooked this, which would really be important information to show that the Lord will be behind this. And Moses called, verse 2, Bezalel and Aholiab, and every craftsman in whose mind the Lord had put skill, everyone whose heart stirred him up to come to do the work. And they received from Moses all the contribution that the people of Israel had brought for doing the work on the sanctuary. They still kept bringing him free will offerings every morning. Why were they bringing free will offerings? Somebody, I know this is not a hard one. We covered this, last week or the week before. There are free will offerings from the people. Why? Well, it's easy. You think, well, that's a response to what? If they bring, it's a response to, it's their answer to a request. What would that request be? To bring free will offerings. I know this is so easy. It's probably beneath your dignity to remember it. It's so easy. But I'm just trying to get us to remember. God had told them, bring this stuff. God, as we pointed out, wants us also to give of our own means, free will offerings. So that's the application there. To us, as we see, it's always been that case. In every age, God depends upon his own human servants to assist in the work and carrying out the work by making sacrifices. So they kept on bringing. Verse 4. So that all the craftsmen who were doing every sort of task on the sanctuary came, each from the task that he was doing. Something's happening, a crisis. What's going on? What a wonderful crisis. We got too much stuff. We got so much they won't quit bringing. Okay, that's what's going to happen. And they said to Moses, the people bring much more than enough for doing the work that the Lord has commanded us to do. Now, you wouldn't think you would read that, would you? I wish it could be said about all of us today in the Lord's church throughout the United States and in all parts of the world. Just think of what we could accomplish if everyone did so. And now, here, there's a lot of generosity. But there are congregations where some don't see the need and have not experienced the joy of giving in a proportionate way to how they've been prospered. And if that were to be the case with all who attend, especially all members of the church, there'll be a lot more in the coffers to apply to specific tasks like radio, television, internet, sending missionaries, that sort of thing. And we could accomplish more. So it's just a natural fact. It takes resources to get the work done. So the people were bringing too much. So Moses gave command, verse 6, and word was proclaimed throughout the camp, let no man or woman do anything more for the contribution for the sanctuary. So the people were restrained from bringing. I like that expression. No, quit bringing us just too much. You're overwhelming the whole place with too much money. We don't have anywhere to put it. No, that wouldn't happen today. If it's liquid resources, money, we can put that in the bank, right? And then use it as it's needed down the road. But they were bringing material objects that would be actually put into service in the tabernacle. So they take up space, and there was time involved in gathering all that material and organizing. Verse 7, for the material they had was sufficient to do all the work and more. So they brought then some and then some. And all the craftsmen among the workmen made the tabernacle with 10 curtains. Again, earlier in the 20s, we were looking at these instructions. They were made of fine twined linen and blue and purple and scarlet yarns with cherubim skillfully worked. The length of each curtain was 28 cubits and the breadth of each curtain 4 cubits. All the curtains were the same size. And I'm thankful my soul's salvation does not depend upon memorizing these details. But at that time, it did for these people. This is the joy of being a Christian today and the grace of Christ. There are things we need to know. There are basic pieces of information, but it's not the same as this. He coupled 5 curtains to one another. Verse 10, and the other 5 curtains he coupled to one another. He made loops of blue on the edge of the outermost curtain of the first set. Likewise, he made them on the edge of the outermost curtain of the second set. He made 50 loops on the one curtain, and he made 50 loops on the edge of the curtain that was in the second set. The loops were opposite one another, and he made 50 clasps of gold and coupled the curtains one to the other with clasps, so the tabernacle was a single whole. It's kind of like reading the dictionary, isn't it? I used to do that when I was a kid, but I don't do it anymore. I've decided that's not the best way to spend your time, just to read through the phone book or the dictionary. But Actually, it's reference material. So as they get in the middle of this, Moses will record this in writing. We have it, what we know as the book of Exodus. They will be able to go back and refer to what they're doing and compare it to the original instructions to see if they're doing it like those instructions said to do it. Even if they have to get out in the weeds a little bit, they're going to be very concerned about the details. 14, he also made curtains of goat's hair for a tent over the tabernacle. He made 11 curtains. The length of each curtain was 30 cubits, and the breadth of each curtain was 4 cubits. The 11 curtains were the same size. He coupled 5 curtains by themselves and 6 curtains by themselves, and he made 50 loops on the edge of the outermost curtain of the one set, and 50 loops on the edge of the other connecting curtain, and he made 50 clasps of bronze to couple the tent together, that it might be a single whole. And he made for the tent a covering of 10 ram skins and goat skins. Any question to this point or comments? All right, I see everybody's on the edge of his seat. Then he made the upright frames for the tabernacle of acacia wood. 10 cubits was the length of a frame, and 1.5 cubits the breadth of each frame. Each frame had 2 tenons for fitting together. He did this for all the frames of the tabernacle. The frames for the tabernacle he made thus: 20 frames for the south side. And he made 40 bases of silver under the 20 frames, 2 bases under one frame. It'd be great if you memorized all this. And some of the preacher schools, they do, I think. And I laud their efforts. They spend 2 years of intensive work. And their minds are focused like a laser on all this. When they get out and graduate from preacher school, many of them can tell you exactly how many curtains, how many attendants, how many classes. And I laud and applaud that. Some of them have not had opportunity, bless their hearts, sometimes to study history or just basic science or even English grammar maybe. And that could be sometimes it could be a setback for some of them. But that's not true of all. Many have already done those things in prior work in high school and in also undergraduate studies in another field. Then they've decided to go to preacher school. My point there is simply this: preacher schools are really designed for more mature men. That's what their original concept was. A 2-year intensive program of study of the Bible, basically the Bible. The supposition being you already went and prepared, say, to be a dentist. So you've been to school a lot. Or maybe you were a history teacher in a middle school. Now you want to be a preacher. Great. Well, you have that background. You don't need to go over all that in this school. We'll focus on the Bible only. Whereas liberal arts colleges, Christian colleges that are called liberal arts, and that's not liberal in the bad sense, it's liberal in the good sense. Liberal arts colleges or universities provide a broader range of studies. The Bible, yes, focus on the Bible, but also other skills necessary to make the Bible come alive for today's generation. Science helps. You need to know a lot of science to help to be able to refute the falsehoods that are promulgated in the name of evolution, for example, history, those sorts of things. Anyway, I said all that to say, and I'm not in any way knocking their approach. Some of these people have this down pat, and boy, they can preach sermons on it. And I've heard some of them, their creativity is amazing. When I hear it, it's like, wow, how did that brother see that? But he did. He found it. And I would have never found it, but I tip my hat to them when I wear one. So, where are we, 25? For the second side of the tabernacle on the north side, or is that where we are? He made 20, and then 40 bases of silver. The tabernacle western made 2 frames according to the tabernacle, and they were separate beneath, but on the top. I'm gonna let you read some of this. We'll just move through and move down, because we probably need to shift gears, and I would think maybe find a book of the Bible, perhaps a New Testament book we'll study in detail after this, that would help us more easily see application of principles. All right, chapter 37. Bezalel made the ark of acacia wood. 2 cubits and a half was its length, 1.5 cubits its breadth, and 1.5 cubits its height. And he overlaid it with pure gold inside. You want to help me out? Somebody, let's start in the back over here. Verse 2. Susan, would you read verse 2? And then we'll move to Barbara and Betty and then Loretta and Jesse and Sister Linda. Well, it'll be up here. It will be, I'm sure, on the board. One.
And he overlaid it with pure gold inside and outside, and made a molding of gold around it.
And it cast for it 4 rings of gold for its 4 feet, 2 rings on its one side and 2 rings on its other side.
He made poles of acacia wood and overlaid them with gold.
And put the poles into the rings on the sides of the ark to carry the ark.
And he made a mercy seat of pure gold, 2 cubits and a half with its length, and a cubit and a half with its breadth.
Let's pause here for just a second before Sister Linda reads the next verse, verse 7. Jesse, that concept we have encountered several times in our Bibles, have we not? That of the mercy seat. So, where was the mercy seat? I think it's indicated right here, but let's just remind ourselves, where was that place known as the mercy seat located in the tabernacle?
What was the purpose of the mercy seat?
That's a very good question. What was the purpose of it? Let's think about what it was, where it was, and then because we know how it was linked up with a certain piece of furniture, we'll get a better idea of what the mercy seat is to serve as. So,
Of the ark of the covenant.
I didn't hear him. So,
On top of the ark.
on top of the Ark of the Covenant. It's the lid to the Ark. So the Ark of the Covenant was basically a what? A big box with a lid on it. And the top of the lid was called the mercy seat. Now we have seen in other instructions, there's a very beautiful ornament on top of it, artwork, sculpture-like work on top of that lid. What was the...
Cherubim.
Well, what are cherubim? That doesn't tell the average person out here.
Creatures that face each other and their wings overlap the mercy seat.
Creatures? Yes, that's right. They're creatures because they're created. But what kind of creatures, what order or race? Well, angel, yeah. The cherubim are the angels. So, all right, so we have the Ark of the Covenant, the most sacred piece of furniture, I guess you'd say, in the tabernacle worship. Then on top of that, the lid is called the mercy seat. On top of the lid is the mercy seat. And there are these angels. And how are they facing? They have wings. And what are the wings doing? Going out that way?
No, they're going inward and they cover over the mercy seat.
All right, they cover the mercy seat, a covering. I think there are a lot of doctrinal ideas that are derived from the literal physical mercy seat. And one of them is there is a covering there. The concept of covering is related to atonement. It's the concept of covering what? Well, what is our number one problem as a human race? Sin, guilt, right? So what is all this about? It's to address that problem, right? It's the solution. These are the details of how God would lead to the final solution, and that's the right use of that expression, which would be Christ Jesus. All right, so we have then the problem, and the mercy seat is where God's presence was especially found. God would dwell where? In a particular way, he would dwell between the wings of the cherubim. The mercy seat, the most sacred place. When all of this is finished, God's very presence is going to come in between those wings on top of the mercy seat. So I just thought we'd do a little surveying and reviewing of that. We've discussed it briefly, I think, before, but we're reminded of it, and then that should be in our minds as we read this. Verse 6, it's a precious place. Of course, it's made of gold. He made a mercy seat. I think what throws us is the expression, the seat. We think of a chair or a piece of furniture we would sit on. Well, that's unfortunate because in modern English, a seat is a place you would sit. But now, who actually will be seated there eventually? It will be God himself, of course. No human would be seated there. It's not a chair. It's the top of the box, the lid. All right, so verse 6, is that it? Is that for Sister Linda to read verse 6? Or did we already read that one? Verse 7, Sister Linda, please.
And he made 2 cherubims of gold. He made them of hammered work on the 2 ends of the mercy seat.
Thank you. And then Susan, 8, please.
One cherub on the one end and one cherub on the other end. Of one piece with the mercy seat, he made the cherubim on its 2 ends.
Barbara?
The cherubim spread out their wings
Yeah.
above, overshadowing the mercy seat, their wings, with their faces one to another, toward the mercy seat were the faces of the cherubim.
He also made the table 2 cubits was its length, a cubit its breadth, and a cubit and a half its height.
Okay.
And he overlaid it with pure gold and made a molding of gold around it.
And he made a rim around it, handbreadth wide, and made a molding of gold around the rim.
He cast for it 4 rings of gold, and fastened the rings to the 4 corners at its 4 legs.
Susan.
Close to the frame were the rings as holders for the poles to carry the table.
He made the poles of acacia wood to carry the table and overlaid them with gold.
And he made the vessels of pure gold that were to be on the table, its plates and dishes for incense, and its bowls and flagons with which to pour drink offerings.
17, please.
He also made the lampstand of pure gold. He made the lampstand of hammered work. Its base, its stem, its cups, its calices, and its flowers were of one piece with it.
And there were 6 branches going out of its sides, 3 branches of the lampstand out of one side of it, and 3 branches of the lampstand out of the other side of it.
3 cups were made like almond blossoms, each with its calyx and flower. On each branch now 3 cups made the like of almond blossom, each with a calyx and a flower on the other branch. So for the 6 branches going out of the lampstand.
And on the lampstand itself were 4 cups made like almond blossoms with their calyxes and flowers.
And the calyx of one piece with it under each pair of 6 branches going out of it.
The calyxes and their branches were with one piece with it. The whole of it was a single piece of hammered work. Pure gold.
And he made its 7 lamps and its tongs and its trays of pure gold.
He made it and all its utensils out of metallic pure gold.
He made the altar of incense of acacia wood. The length was a cubit, and the breadth was a cubit. It was square, and 2 cubits was its height. Its horns were one piece with it.
He overlaid it with pure gold, its top and around its sides and its horns, and he made a molding of gold around it.
And made 2 rings of gold on it under its molding on 2 opposite sides of it as holders for the poles with which to carry it.
And he made poles of acacia wood, and overlaid them with gold.
He made the holy anointing oil also and the pure fragrant incense blended as fire between them.
He made the altar of burnt offering of acacia wood, 5 cubits was its length, 5 cubits its breadth. It was square, and 3 cubits was its height.
And made 2 rings of gold under it.
Hold on. Sorry. I did the wrong one. There.
He made horns for it on its 4 corners. Its horns were of one piece with it, and he overlaid it with bronze.
And he made all the utensils of the altar, the pots, the shovels, the basins, the forks, and the fire pans. He made all of the utensils of bronze. It's not working.
Okay.
Where were we on, Susan?
Well,
Page 4 is
we
what
can
it's
pause here. I was
This is-
wanting to pause anyway for a moment and go back and look at a New Testament application of some of these principles. There are more principles. We haven't read them all. Hebrews chapter 9. We're about ready to dismiss this class, so we'll have a few minutes. But chapter 9, verse 1, Hebrews 9 and verse 1 in the New Testament. And he says, now even the first covenant had regulations for worship in an earthly place of holiness. Well, we've been reading about all of that. For a tent was prepared, the first section in which were the lampstand and the table and the bread of the presence. It is called the holy place. Behind the second curtain was a second section called the most holy place, having the golden altar of incense and the ark of the covenant covered on all sides with gold, in which was a golden urn holding the manna. Now we haven't gotten into that yet, but I don't think, have we? I don't believe we've covered that, but we will. And Aaron's staff that budded, and the tablets of the covenant, the Ten Commandments, in other words. Above it were the cherubim of glory overshadowing the mercy seat. Of these things we cannot now speak in detail. Neither can we, because time is running out, right? But he didn't. In other words, I think he thought, it's not my purpose to write in detail about all of this, but he made this available. Hey, come right in, y'all. Good to see you. Good to see you. So then he goes on to talk about the priestly functions in Hebrews chapter 9, and we move forward as we are able to turn these pages. All right, so chapter 9, verse 12 or 11. But when Christ appeared as a high priest of the good things that have come, then through the greater, more perfect tent, tabernacle, the King James, of course, not made with hands, that is, not of this creation. So what he's showing us is obviously God, in the very beginning of time, planned out this moonlight era of revelation, we could call the days of Moses and the Israelites, to serve as a type or a shadow of the reality or the antitype of new covenant atonement, the covenant which is, of course, final for all men, a spiritual covenant. That was a very material or physical covenant with material, tangible things, physical things to be witnessed by the congregants. Today we use our minds more and think abstractly of what Christ did as he was reenacting those things. He entered once for all into the holy places, not that literal tent, but by means of not by the blood of goats and calves, but by means of his own blood, thus securing an eternal redemption. All right, so I want you to go back. We're not going to read all that. We've looked at that before, and just be reminded of the connection that is made in the New Testament with this material. And I'm sure the Hebrew writer would scold me for any type of irreverence he may have detected on my part if he were here saying, oh, he loved the details, the Hebrew writer. Although he would say, we cannot now speak of some of them. But he still loved the details because they all meant something in terms of the larger picture of the new covenant. Now, we are in chapter, 38, I think. I'm going to probably have to start bringing another Bible. This one is nigh unto impossible to turn the pages. And to read, for me, because at my age, you need big print.
38:4 is where we start.
38:4, okay. I'll finish that. And he made for the altar a grating, a network of bronze under its ledge, extending halfway down. He cast 4 rings on the 4 corners of the bronze grating as holders for the pole. He made the poles of acacia wood and overlaid them with bronze. And he put the poles through the rings on the side of the altar, carried it with him. He made it hollow with boards. So I appreciate your help in the reading a while ago. I just have to know my own limitations, as Dirty Harry used to say in the movie. Man's got to know his limitations. And if I speak for 50 minutes solid and then try to present a sermon, at my age it becomes more difficult. That's my excuse, and I'm sticking with it. Thank you all for your help. We'll go ahead now and we'll just stop at verse 8 and try to remember this for our next study. Let me see. We have the rest of this chapter and 2 more. And we'll try our best to get through, and maybe after that to come up with another change of plans. Maybe a gospel, one of the gospels. We'll find out. But I want your input on that. But no, it won't be numbers. No, I'll just say not right now. We may come to that later, but maybe something else. So any questions or comments? All right. Thank y'all very much, and we'll take a few minutes.